Hello, my name is Nicholas Eames. I'm the author of two books in the series called The Band, Kings of the Wyld and Bloody Rose. They take place in a setting where mercenary bands are afforded the fame and fortune of rock stars. Anyways, thank you for having me. I thought I'd open up, well, first of all, this is my house. Got my booze, got my books, my strategically placed Gemmell Award in the back. Morningstar Award. Sorry, someone else won the big one. Anyways, I thought I'd open up by saying just some of the books I've been reading lately, or listening to as well, because they are awesome and deserve all the hype they can get. I wrote a list down on the back of this adorable owlbear portrait of the books I've been listening to, just in case I forget. Anyways, they are in no particular order. Master of Sorrows by Justin Call, which, although it isn't necessarily revealed in the first book, is sort of like the origin story of a Dark Lord, and it was awesome. The narrator is phenomenal. Speaking of phenomenal narrators, The Last Smile in Sunder City by Luke Arnold is kind of like a noir detective fantasy story, which was great. It's nice and short, which I appreciate, and it's narrated by Luke himself, who's an actor, and he does all the voices. And Orbit won't let me do my own. I don't know why. You'll probably see why when I read you some of my story pretty soon. But anyways, Gideon the Ninth by Tasman Muir is what I'm listening to right now, which is awesome. Lesbian necromancers in space, if you haven't heard the tagline before. And the voice of this character is something very, very, very unique that I've never read before. It's fantastic. And then up next, City of Brass by Shannon Chakraborty, which I've bought a couple books ago and just haven't got around to yet, and I've wanted to forever, which has recently been picked up for a TV show, I believe, so that's going to be great. Anyways, on to what I've read. I've been reading a lot. Alex White's A Bad Deal for the Whole Galaxy. This is the sequel to A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. It's awesome. Kings of the Wyld in space. I don't know what higher praise I can possibly give to a book besides that. Secondly, The Bard's Blade by Brian D. Anderson. Brian and I share an editor, formerly at Orbit, now at Tor. Anyways, this book is fantastic. Brian's a self-published author that moved into the traditional publishing sphere, and is an all-round great guy. Book called A Wild Sheep Chase by a little-known author named Haruki Murakami. Just kidding, he is super famous. This book is fantastic. All of Murakami's stuff is. If you haven't read it before, it's hard to describe. It's kind of like books about people doing absolutely nothing, but in an interesting way. Ooh, you Brits are going to love this one. Just kidding, I'll talk about it. Robin Hobb, Assassin's Apprentice. I had never read Robin Hobb, and when I went to England a couple years ago, I realized that she is revered as God there. So I thought maybe there's something to this. Anyways, a lot of people obviously love her. My cat got to this book and chewed the shit out of it. Anyways, obviously the book is great. Pretty sad at some points, and I hear I'm in for a rough ride when I continue with the whole series. This book was phenomenal. It's called The Black Tongue Thief. It's not out till May 2021, this thing tells me here. Also from Kings of the Wyld's original editor. One of them, anyways. Anyways, this book is phenomenal. It's got probably one of the best voices I've ever read. Every single page I laughed or came across an extremely cleverly written turn of phrase. Every single page. This fucking thing is amazing. I hope I'm allowed to swear, or this is a bust. Anyways, and then I'm currently reading, at long last, Raven Cry by Ed McDonald, the sequel to Blackwing. This is my copy from Andrina Books. It's got red pages, signed by Ed himself, number 246, which are my other two. So I don't normally like reading like these special awesome copies just because I want to preserve them, but I got no other way to ingest it, and in the end, books are just books, right? Is there anything else? No, I guess we can get around to reading. Anyways, I'm going to read from Bloody Rose, which is the second book in my series. They're both standalone books, so if you want to start with Bloody Rose, you're more than welcome to. Obviously, it would spoil a couple things from Kings of the Wyld, a little bit, but Kings of the Wyld tells you in the second chapter. If you don't know what happens in the end, then you did not read it. So yeah, just you can enjoy it. And a lot of people have started with Bloody Rose and loved it just the same. And I suspect that reading Kings of the Wyld after Bloody Rose, certain events will make that whole book a lot more poignant. Anyways, Bloody Rose is Kings of the Wyld being sort of like a 70s themed book. Bloody Rose is sort of 80s themed and represents that generation of 80s rock stars and musicians that were trying desperately and recklessly to prove that they were better than the era before them. So they took everything to a whole new level, almost to self-destructive ends, aka Guns and Roses. Anyway, so Bloody Rose is the daughter of the leader of the band from Kings of the Wyld. She is the titular character of the book, but not the narrator. She leads a band called Fable, and the main character is a young girl named Tam Hashford, who wants to be a bard. And bards kind of follow these bands around. They're kind of like rock journalists. This book is very, kind of my version of Almost Famous, if you will, a rock journalist on the road with their heroes and discovering, maybe those heroes aren't all they cracked up to be. Anyways, the part I'm going to read is just near the beginning of the book, right after Tam has been offered a job as Fable's bard. She goes home to tell her father, Tuck, who was in a band himself. His wife was their bard, and she was killed. So he would like Tam never to leave the house and to stay home and work in the bar forever. Tam paused outside the door to her home, steeling herself for the ordeal ahead. She heard a meow from inside, Threnody heralding her arrival. When she finally worked up the courage to enter, the cat threw herself against Tam's boot and purred contentedly. Her father was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a mug of what she hoped was just beer. He was staring at nothing and toying absently with a strip of yellow ribbon. "What did I tell you about putting bows on the cat?" he asked. Tam shook off her cloak and hung it by the door, then knelt to scratch Threnody behind the ears. She was rewarded with another throaty purr. Thren was a long-haired Palapti, white as fresh snowfall. Tam's mother had brought her home from a tour down south. "But she looks so cute with it on there." "She looks ridiculous. Don't—" He trailed off as she stood, his glare fastened to the instrument in Tam's arms. "What's that for?" he asked. "Playing music?" Tam answered. "Great start," she berated herself. "Way to butter him up." "Why do you have it?" he clarified. "Ed gave it to me." Tuck's perpetual frown deepened. "Well, you've no need of it. You'll return it tomorrow." "I won't." "You will." "I can't." "Can't?" Her father looked suspicious. "Why can't?" Outside, the wind picked up. It pummeled the walls and clawed at the windows with ice-cold fingers. Threnody finished circling Tam's foot and trotted over to her water bowl, oblivious to the tension in the room. Or maybe she just didn't care. Cats could be assholes sometimes, and Thren was no exception. "Fable's in town," she said. "They were at the Cornerstone tonight. Uncle Bran—" She saw her father's knuckles go white, no doubt wishing the mug in his hands were Brannigan's throat. "They mentioned they were looking for a bard, and Bran told them I could play." "Can you now?" Her father's tone was breezy, conversational. That's when she knew he was really angry. "Self-taught, are you? A born natural? You haven't picked up a lute since you were little." "Ed's been teaching me after work," she admitted. Boy, she was throwing everyone under the Argosie's wheel tonight, wasn't she? She might as well confess that Tara had been giving her archery lessons twice a week, or that Timax poured her a beer at the end of every shift. That way her father could plot the murder of everyone in the Cornerstone. "Is that so?" Tucked down what remained of his mug and stood. "Then when you return his loot tomorrow, you can let Ed know you're quitting. They need extra hands at the mill. You can start next week." "I already quit," she told him, irritated by the dismissiveness in his tone. "I'm Fable's bard now." "No, you're not." "Yes, I am. Tam." His voice grew stern. "Dad." His mug exploded against the far wall. Threnody bolted from the room as shards rained to the floor. She said nothing, only waited for his rage to subside. He slumped back into his chair. I'm sorry, Tam. I can't let you go. I can't risk losing you, too. So what? She asked. I'm supposed to stay in Ardburg my whole life? Work at the mill for a few lousy court marks a week? Find some nice, boring girl to settle down with? There's nothing... Wait, girl? Maiden's mercy, Dad. Are we really doing this now? That doesn't matter, Tuck said. Listen, this is our fault. I know that. Your mother and I told you too many stories. We made being a merc sound more glamorous than it is. It's a hard life, you know. Long, lonely roads. You're wet half the time, cold all the time, and then you fight some horrible thing in some awful place and you're scared shitless it'll kill you before you kill it. It's not like in the songs, Tam. Mercenaries aren't heroes. They're killers. Tam moved to join him at the table. She set the lute down and took her seat. The chair between them, her mother's chair, remained empty as a chasm. Things are different now, she said, laying her hand over his. We'll be touring arenas mostly. I'll probably never see the inside of a monster's lair or set foot in the Wyld. Her father shook his head, unconvinced. There's a horde north of Cragmore, the remnants of those who survived Castia. Rose'll want her crack at it, sure as hell is cold. Ain't nobody loves glory like that girl. Except maybe her father. Gods, that guy was a piece of work. Rose wants nothing to do with it. That caught him by surprise. Really? Tam shrugged. Babel's going to finish the last leg of their tour. They've got fights in every town between here and Highpool, and a contract in Dire March after that. Dire March? What's the contract? I don't know. But whatever it is, I'll be 1,000 miles away from the Bruma Horde. She had no idea whether or not that was true. She wasn't even sure where Dire March was. Her father seemed halfway convinced, however, so she didn't bother mentioning Rose's warning, that whatever they were going up against might be just as dangerous as the Horde itself. For a while, her father's gaze remained fixed on the floor, roving the scatter of clay shards as though trying to decide whether or not he could piece them together again. As the silence stretched, Tam dared to hope she'd found the chink in the impenetrable armor of Tuck Hashford's embittered cynicism. No, he said finally. You're not going. But I don't care, he said leadenly. Whatever you're going to say, whatever reasons you think will justify leaving, none of them matter. Not to me. You don't get a say in this, Tam. I'm sorry. I should have listened to Bran, she thought. I should have left without saying goodbye. The fire inside her was waning, and Tam feared it would go out forever if she didn't act now. She stood and set out for the door. Chips of clay crunched beneath her boots. Tam, I'll stay at the Cornerstone tonight. She pulled her cloak off its peg. Tam, sit down. We're headed for the arena first thing in the morning, she said, doing her best to keep the tremor from her voice. And we start east the morning after. I doubt I'll see you before then, so this is... She turned and froze. Her father was standing, staring down at the object in his hands, the lute she'd left behind on the table. It looked small, so impossibly fragile, as though her dream of joining a band and following in her mother's footsteps, of escaping this city, this house, this prison of sorrow and its grief-stricken jailer, were but a toy in the grasp of a malevolent child. Dad. He looked up. Their eyes met. In hers, a plea. In his, a black rage rising. Something, another apology, perhaps, died on his lips, and then her father took her lute by its neck and smashed her dream to splinters. The end of the entire book. No adventure begins after that. Just kidding. It's chapter 3. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, if you did, to the end, and for joining me here, and to Super Relaxed Fantasy Club for inviting me. It was a real honor. Hopefully, maybe next year, maybe the year after that, maybe decades from now, when we all emerge from our bunkers, I'll be able to come visit you in person. Anyways, thank you again, and stay safe.